Hello and welcome to Charch Chat. This is a special Tony Romo edition of Charch Chat in which I break down the Tony Romo injury. He's going to be gone about a month. We'll talk about what it means for the rest of the Cowboys star players, what it means for Brad Johnson, and if there is, in fact, a positive angle for those of you that are in good playoff shape right now. Let's first start here. Brad Johnson comes in. He hasn't played meaningful ball in a couple of years. His last full season, or mostly full season, was with Minnesota in 2006, and he was bad. 9 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. It wasn't pretty. And, you know, you worry that in addition to Brad Johnson's skill set and where he might be at 40 years old, and where his arm is, which was weak a couple of years ago, you know, where it really fits in with a Tony Romo style offense. So Tony Romo, he's fast enough, he's elusive out of the pocket, strong arm. It's almost the opposite of what Brad Johnson brings. Johnson's an immobile quarterback with a weak arm, and you know, I think he was not the right choice to be the backup quarterback anyway, because now offensive coordinator Jason Garrett's got to run a really materially different offense than he ran before. Most of the things that Tony Romo can do, Brad Johnson can't do, and to make this offense work with what Brad Johnson can bring to the table will require a significant amount of work for the offensive coordinator and the rest of the offense here. This is going to be a different offense than we've seen before, and probably a much less dynamic one, which is pretty unfortunate. You know, if you think about picking up Brad Johnson, I wouldn't. Part of it's the schedule, which we'll get to in a second. I think you're better off with a guy off the waiver wire like a Chad Pennington or Matt Ryan than you are picking up Brad Johnson, figuring he's got all these weapons around him. He might have a little bit of success next week. In part because it's one of the easiest matchups on the schedule for the Cowboys, who have a very difficult schedule the rest of the way. It's at St. Louis. But after that, it gets pretty dicey. They've got Tampa Bay, then they've got at the Giants, and then they've got a bye week. And then if he's ready, Tony Romo comes back with a very tough game against Washington. If he's not ready, Brad Johnson's got to go for that one too. So this thing is going to be pretty hairy for a lot of the Cowboys because of the difficulty in the schedule. Now, as we look at some of the other players, let's go to the running game, which has been inconsistent for a couple of weeks anyway. Now, you might be tempted to think with the passing game ailing, with Brad Johnson there, they're going to run more often. And you're probably right. They will run more often. But will they run more effectively? And I don't think so, because when you don't have a good passing game to open things up for the running game, it's that much harder to run the ball. There's no such thing as a good injury on offense. If it's bad for the passing game, it's bad for the running game, and vice versa. You know, so much of the success that we see from Marion Barber and Felix Jones is because the passing game is opening up a lot of opportunities for that running game. Now, Terrell Owens, I think it especially gets harmed here because you don't have a long ball threat from Brad Johnson. You just don't. You know, it's going to be throwing wobblers downfield if it's more than 20 yards. He doesn't get a lot of air under his balls. This is going to be really a tough situation for Terrell Owens, and he's so mercurial anyway. Is he going to go off? Who knows? Jason Witten, though, I like his opportunities a little better. He may stay reasonably similar to what he's doing now because Johnson's going to throw a lot of short underneath stuff that's tight end territory. Witten is one of the better downfield tight ends, but you know, I think at least from a catches standpoint, Witten won't be so dramatically changed as much as the rest of the players will. Now, some of you could be thinking about this is a buy opportunity on Cowboys, especially if you're 5-1 or you're 6-0 right now, thinking, hey, I could go get Cowboys now. Even if I take some losses in October and early November, I'll get wins in December in the playoff months. And I love the thinking. However, where it gets tricky is that Dallas' schedule down the stretch is brutal. Take a listen to this. Either Week 17 matchup is at Pittsburgh. That's very, very difficult. They say 17. Week 14 matchups at Pittsburgh. The Week 15 matchup is the Giants. Week 16 matchup is Baltimore. And Week 17, if they're playing, at Philadelphia. So very, very difficult schedule right now for the Cowboys as you look ahead to the playoff run. So if you're thinking about grabbing these Cowboys for the playoffs, just know that the schedule is going to be working against you every step of the way, and I think that short circuits a lot of my interest in acquiring Cowboys on the cheap now for a playoff run later. So, you know, I'd like to give you some positive spin on this, but there really isn't any. A superstar quarterback just went down. There's nothing good that comes out of this. It's just varying degrees of bad. I wish there was some good news here. There just isn't. There's very little of a positive way to look at this. I think this is Brad Johnson again, especially ill-suited fit for the Cowboys. Maybe some small measure of success next week against the Rams. The Rams are not a good team despite what they did with Washington last week, and I wish I had more good news. It's very hard to find a silver lining in the Tony Romo injury. There you go. A special edition of Charch Chat here at Open Sports. Appreciate you checking us out.
So you think you can tackle a pro? There's only one way to find out. Click on fantasy at opensports.com.